Okay, so welcome in everyone to Wednesday at 1. We're glad that you are with us today. And I'm going to go ahead and light the candle to start. I started out today in my chapel time with the little kids from the preschool. I said, every good storyteller starts their story by lighting a candle. So keep that in mind. So anyway, today we are starting on chapter 22 of Acts. If you want to get yourself there, chapter 22, we're going to back up just a little bit just to kind of remind ourselves what's going on. We're in the saga of Paul and the authorities coming screeching towards the end of Acts. And so I will be looking forward to whatever you have in mind for maybe our next step, next book or next study that you want to do. If we want to go back into the Old Testament or whatever, we can chat about that. And also, if you all would be thinking about, those of you who are on the Zoom, if you're thinking about meeting in person, like in November, as long as the COVID numbers are good, we would meet in person, still be on Facebook and YouTube, but the Zoom part would just be live. So, tell me if that's terrible that you don't want to do that or whatever, but we can meet out in the narthex where we've got some more space to be distanced and everything. But that's all going to depend on the numbers being okay and staying going in the right direction, which is what we're hoping. So Acts 22. Get yourself there and let's take a minute and bow our heads and our hearts in a moment of prayer. Gracious God, once again, we come to you and we thank you for the gift of your word. We especially thank you today for the work of the Apostle Paul and all that he did to bring the word outside of the circle of those who had been religious worshipers and followers of Yahweh. And we thank you for the opportunity as Gentiles to hear that word firsthand from those who had that kind of relationship with Jesus. And we also thank you for all of those who contributed to the printed word coming to us over the generations so that we might feel that we can walk and talk and hear the voice of Jesus through their words and through their witness. And we hope that we can do the same for those who are around us in need of some light in their dark world. And we relish that call to do that work and to do that with service. So we pray all these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, so if you will recall, Paul has been kind of rolling around the Mediterranean in our last episode. Paul was in Ephesus, had gone back to Ephesus, and now he's really butting heads with the Jews, the ones, not the Christ-believing Jews, but the Jews who were remaining faithful to Jewish law and tradition. We're not accepting Jesus as Messiah. And so here now they're getting a little more strong in their opposition and their rejection of him and his teaching. And so it has gotten so bad that they are accusing him of things that he did not do, like taking Gentiles into the temple and kind of inciting, fomenting the riotous crowd, which we remember, we kind of looked at that and how that echoed what happened with Jesus. And then we left it last week. He was brought to the barracks. They kind of had to make a way for him to get into the barracks. And when he was there, I'm going to pick this up just a couple of verses before chapter 22. He was there with a Roman tribune. So that's where I'm going to pick it up. Just as Paul was about to be brought into the barracks, he said to the tribune, "May I say something to you?" The tribune replied, "Do you know Greek? Then you are not the Egyptian who recently stirred up a revolt and led the 4,000 assassins out into the wilderness." Paul replied, "I am a Jew from Tarsus in Cilicia, a citizen of an important city. I beg you, let me speak to the people." When he had given permission, the tribune, Paul stood on the steps and motioned to the people for silence. And when there was a great hush, he addressed them in the Hebrew language, saying, "Brothers and fathers, listen to the defense that I now make before you." When they heard him addressing them in Hebrew, they became even more quiet. Then he said, "I am a Jew, born in Tarsus in Cilicia and brought up in this city at the feet of Gamaliel, educated strictly according to our ancestral law, being zealous for God, just as all of you are today. I persecuted this way up to the point of death by binding both men and women and putting them in prison, as the high priest and the whole council of the elders can testify about me. From them, I also received letters to the brothers in Damascus, and I went there in order to bind those who were there and to bring them back to Jerusalem for punishment. While I was on my way and approaching Damascus, about noon, a great light from heaven suddenly shone about me. I fell to the ground and heard a voice saying to me, "Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me?" I answered, "Who are you, Lord?" Then he said to me, "I am Jesus of Nazareth, whom you are persecuting." Now those who were with me saw the light, but did not hear the voice of the one who was speaking to me. I asked, "What am I to do, Lord?" The Lord said to me, "Get up and go to Damascus. There you will be told everything that has been assigned to you to do." Since I could not see because of the brightness of that light, those who were with me took my hand and led me to Damascus. A certain Ananias, who was a devout man according to the law and well spoken of by all the Jews living there, came to me, and standing beside me, he said, "Brother Saul, regain your sight." In that very hour, I regained my sight and saw him. Then he said, "The God of our ancestors has chosen you to know his will, to see the righteous one, and to hear his own voice. Or you will be his witness to all the world of what you have seen and heard. And now, why do you delay? Get up, be baptized, and have your sins washed away, calling on his name." After I had returned to Jerusalem, and while I was praying in the temple, I fell into a trance and saw Jesus saying to me, "Hurry and get out of Jerusalem quickly, because they will not accept your testimony about me." And I said, "Lord, they themselves know that in every synagogue I imprisoned and beat those who believed in you. And while the blood of your witness Stephen was shed, I myself was standing by, approving and keeping the coats of those who killed him." Then he said to me, "Go, for I will send you far away to the Gentiles." Let's see. Up to this point, they listened to him, but then they shouted, "Away with such a fellow from the earth, for he should not be allowed to live." And while they were shouting, throwing off their cloaks and tossing dust into the air, the tribune directed that he was to be brought into the barracks and ordered him to be examined by flogging to find out the reason for this outcry against him. But when they had tied him up with thongs, Paul said to the centurion who was standing by, "Is it legal for you to flog a Roman citizen who is uncondemned?" When the centurion heard that, he went to the tribune and said to him, "What are you about to do? This man is a Roman citizen." The tribune came and asked Paul, "Tell me, are you a Roman citizen?" And he said, "Yes." And the tribune answered, "It cost me a large sum of money to get my citizenship." Paul said, "But I was born a citizen." Immediately, those who were about to examine him drew back from him, and the tribune also was afraid, for he realized that Paul was a Roman citizen and that he had bound him. Okay, let me back up a little bit and just make a couple of comments. Any comments, questions about this section? This should seem incredibly familiar to you, at least most of it, because if you turn back, if you want to you might make a little note in your margin here that the conversion of Saul story, now told through Paul's, from Paul's lips, is recorded in Acts 9, starting at 1. It's pretty similar. until you get to Ananias. And then we get a little bit more detail and some different perspective, because in the beginning of the chapter, we're telling it from a narrative standpoint, where this is what happened to Paul. And, God spoke to Ananias and said, go to this street called Straight, and there you're going to find a guy. And Ananias was like, heck no, I'm not going to see this guy because he's got a reputation. But then, he gives in and goes. So now we're hearing that story from Paul's perspective, which is kind of interesting. And it would be fun. I'm going to give you some little extra credit homework. If you would like to, hold your hand in one, go to the other one, and, read the 9:1 account, and then read the 22nd chapter account from Paul, and see where are the differences and where are some of the contrasts and comparisons that you might want to make, details that we get out of that. I did want you to note that at 22, the address is made to brothers and fathers. For people who have trouble with the NRSV translation, this is just a really good indicator that they are translating in the best of all possible ways. If the words that are used mean brothers and fathers, that's the way they translate it. They don't make it inclusive, like people. But if the word is people, they don't translate it as men. So see the difference. So because they have translated here as brothers and fathers, that those were the words that were used. So, and that makes sense that Paul would have addressed to brothers and fathers, not to mention the women and children. So, he was talking to the men in the crowd. And then he basically gives them his credentials. But the cool thing here is, just a second, Pam. The cool thing here is that it says he's speaking Hebrew, but my footnote says, in other words, Aramaic. Okay, so when they talk about speaking Hebrew, that just kind of makes me think about all the other times if there's a reference to Hebrew, and I might in my spare time, I might go back and see where it says that they were speaking Hebrew in the New Testament, and see if it's possible that actually what they were speaking is Aramaic. Because I don't know how widespread the use of Aramaic is a dialect of Hebrew, most often used in Galilee. So the disciples, the apostles, the 12, and Jesus would have spoken Aramaic rather than like biblical Hebrew that we know. Just a kind of piece of side interest, of interest kind of information. Yeah, Pam, did you have a question or comment?
Yeah, who were the brothers in Damascus? Was that just the disciples, or was that James and John, or?
No, that would have been, wait a minute. No, he was talking to the Jews who were against the way. Okay, the way being the Christians, because he's coming with letters from the high priest and the council of elders. So he's coming authorized by the Sanhedrin to root out any Christ-believing Jews from the Jewish community. So the letters were sent to the brothers in Damascus who were the Jewish brothers, so that they could turn in anybody that they knew who was a Christ-believing Jew. That's where he went to grab those folks and to drag them back to Jerusalem to be tried for heresy. And this is where the where the rubber hits the road between the Jews who were remaining faithful to the law and to Jewish tradition and that sort of thing, and not believing that Jesus was Messiah. And then the Christ-believing Jews who were following Jesus. They were all still together in community until it started to fall apart. And then the Jews and the Christians started to be in enmity towards each other. And that's what we're seeing here. And Paul seems to be the flashpoint between those two groups of folks.
I have.
Go ahead. Melanie, you're breaking up.
Oh, okay. I'm curious about Paul's Roman citizenship. It could just be because he was born in Tarsus, because he told that at the very beginning, and they not a Roman citizen. So how was Paul a Roman citizen?
Because he was born in Tarsus, which was a Roman city at the time, was occupied by Rome. And he would have been born under, there are other people who talk about his parentage and that sort of thing, that maybe his father had bought citizenship in Rome because he was a tradesman or whatever, but none of that is, that's all conjecture. We don't really know. So the deal is the fact that Tarsus was a Roman city and he was born in Tarsus. And so therefore that made him a citizen of Rome. It didn't have anything to do with ethnicity. It had to do with where you were born. Okay.
When I looked it up, what they said was Tarsus, the ruler who had relinquished Tarsus to Rome had made a special agreement with Rome that all of the citizens of Tarsus would be Roman citizens.
Okay.
That was part of his agreement.
Part of the deal.
Yeah.
Oh, shrewd. If you're going to occupy us, we want to be on your side. It's like, okay, if that makes it better, okie dokie. Yeah. But it's kind of like, it's not, people get confused because they go, well, being Jewish doesn't have anything to do with where you're born. How can being Roman have to do with where you're born? I mean, I was born in Missouri. I'm a Missourian. Okay. But just because I was born in Missouri, I mean, I'm of German descent and the people down the street are of Italian descent. It doesn't make me Italian. It makes me, I was born in Missouri, so I'm a Missourian, but my ethnic heritage is something completely different. So, being a Missourian doesn't make me anything else. So by virtue of that, ethnically, Paul was from the people of Israel, of the tribe of Benjamin. But when this, because he was born in Tarsus and this arrangement was made. But I think that was probably, people who lived in other cities that were occupied resisted the designation of citizen. I mean, Jerusalem, that's a great example. Nobody wanted to be a Roman citizen. Even the people who worked for Rome were not considered Roman citizens. So, this deal that got made, was a pretty shrewd deal by whoever that ruler was of Tarsus, who handed Tarsus over to Roman occupation. Okay, anything else on that? Then we have this I would say, look at 22:17. This is what I would call special acts, in the Gospels, and this is kind of a derivative of a gospel because Luke, the same one who wrote Luke wrote Acts. But one of the things I would say about this is this particular piece of information we don't have anyplace else. That Paul says after he returned to Jerusalem after the road to Damascus, he was praying in the temple and he saw Jesus telling him to get out of Jerusalem quickly. Okay, that isn't recorded earlier in Acts. This is Paul's personal witness. So at some point, Luke, or whoever wrote Luke, had to have information that only Paul could have shared. And so this idea that he was in the temple in Jerusalem, he saw another vision of Jesus telling him to leave. And he says, they themselves know that they know who I am. They know that in every synagogue, I took people out and imprisoned and beat them, the people who believed in you. So I don't want to be seen because I'm in danger. And then he confesses the fact that he was also there at the stoning of Stephen and just stood there and held people's coats. You kind of, if you don't read the whole of Acts and you just read, the conversion of Saul or the stoning of Stephen earlier, I don't know that it says anything about him holding coats, but it seems to be information that people know. So this is one of those places where Paul is telling Jesus information that he needs to get off of his chest. So he's confessing to Jesus. And I think that's really, really cool. And then Jesus says to him, "Go, for I will send you far away to the Gentiles." So this is where we get the personal call from Jesus to Paul, because you kind of like, nowhere else it's like, why did he go to the Gentiles? This is the reason why he went to the Gentiles. But up until this point, it was just like, that's kind of what he did. Maybe because he felt like he had an affinity to the Gentiles, or, we don't really know why he felt called to the Gentiles until you read this particular passage where he feels like Jesus himself said, basically, I'm going to protect you. I'm going to send you far away, and your mission is going to be to the Gentiles. So that's kind of an interesting piece of information that oftentimes I don't think this is part of the lectionary. So it's one of those things that I don't know that we see this anywhere else, this information that comes directly from Paul's recollections. Okay, anything else about that? Okay, I'm going to keep going here at verse 30. Since he went to find out what Paul was accused of by the Jews, the next day, the centurion or the tribune released him and ordered the chief priests and the entire council to meet. He brought Paul down and had him stand before them. So now we've got this tribune and the centurion. The centurion has called the tribune to account because the word has come to him that Paul's a Roman citizen and obviously should not have been in this position at the hands of Rome. So the centurion, who ranks higher than the tribune, is kind of dressing him down for this situation. And the tribune, who's been with Paul this whole time, realizes that he should have checked. He should have known who his prisoner was and what kind of punishment he could receive. And so they bring him now to the chief priests and the Sanhedrin. And they're asking now the Sanhedrin again, here again, one of the things that the Romans used to do all the time was to say, okay, this is not a Roman issue. We're going to give it back to your leadership because this is your issue, not ours. So they were constantly trying to keep out of these family arguments that were going on. So the fact that they call for a meeting of the Sanhedrin to bring him to that meeting is an interesting wrinkle in the story. So while Paul was looking intently at the council, he said, "Brothers, up to this day, I have lived my life with a clear conscience before God." Then the high priest Ananias ordered those standing near him to strike him on the mouth. At this, Paul said to him, "God will strike you, you whitewashed wall. Are you sitting there to judge me according to the law? And yet in violation of the law, you order me to be struck?" Those standing nearby said, "Do you dare to insult God's high priest?" And Paul said, "I did not realize, brothers, that he was high priest. For it is written, you shall not speak evil of a leader of your people." When Paul noticed that some were Sadducees and others were Pharisees, he called out in the council, "Brothers, I am a Pharisee, a son of Pharisees. I am on trial concerning the hope of the resurrection of the dead." When he said this, a dissension began between the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and the assembly was divided. The Sadducees say there is no resurrection, or angel, or spirit, but the Pharisees acknowledge all three. Then a great clamor arose, and certain scribes of the Pharisees group stood up and contended, "We find nothing wrong with this man. What if a spirit or an angel has spoken to him?" When the dissension became violent, the tribune, fearing that they would tear Paul to pieces, ordered the soldiers to go down, take him by force, and bring him into the barracks. That night, the Lord stood near him and said, "Keep up your courage, for just as you have testified for me in Jerusalem, so you must bear witness also in Rome." Okay, let's take just a little break there. And I wanted to see if there is anybody got a footnote on the other Ananias and this Ananias? Is it just a coinky dink that the high priest's name is Ananias and Ananias was the guy in Damascus who ministered to Paul? I don't have any. I don't have any footnotes on that.
Susan,
Yeah,
All I have is Ananias was a high priest in the region of Claudius and Nero and was murdered by rebels about 66 CE.
mhm. Yeah. I don't, it's not the same guy, but it's just interesting that, you know, we're always talking about the names that keep replicating themselves, but I don't believe there's any connection between those two. It's just curious that these two guys are, you know, one of them restores his sight and one of them seeks to kill him. It's like, isn't that the way the world is? Yeah. So was that, you were just getting my attention from Elva Lloyd?
yes, ma'am.
Thank you, sir. Okay, so this whole thing before the council is very curious because what happens here is, you know, we've been going down this road in the story. The two factions were the Jews, the traditional Jews and the progressive Jews, you know, the Christ believing Jews. So we have this bifurcation in the synagogue community of those who believed in Jesus and those who did not, but they were all Jews. Now we've moved into the upper echelon of leadership, and it is no longer Jew versus Christian. Now we have the division is between the leadership and the Sadducees and the Pharisees. So, you know, just an easy way to do this is it's like going into the House of Representatives and you got Republicans and Democrats and a sprinkling of independents, okay, who are heck bent to not agree with one another regardless of what the issue is. Okay, so we know what that's about. We've been in the middle of that. So we've got these two expressions, two philosophies, two theological sets of rules. Okay, the Sadducees, you know, they're Sadducee because they don't believe in the resurrection, but they also were considered the conservatives. Okay, because they believed that only the Torah or the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible that at that time, you know, we all thought that Moses wrote. That was it. You know, that's the whole thing. That was the entire witness of the Hebrew Bible was the first 5 books of the Bible. And so anything that happens after Moses' death and the entry into the promised land, they don't have, you know, books that talk about that. They have the oral history, but, you know, the Sadducees only deal with the law of the Pentateuch, the Mosaic covenant and the Mosaic law. So they're kind of, you know, it's like they stopped reading, they stopped studying, they stopped thinking. And actually, sorry to keep referring to the Chosen, but at one point in the Chosen, Nicodemus says to Shmuel, his mentee, do you think that God stopped talking when Moses died? You know, so like, you know, there was a whole lot of stuff that happened after Moses' death that has informed Judaic law and Judaic practice, which the Sadducees just ignored. And I think there's a scene, seems to me there's a scene in the second season, yeah, where John is with Jesus in the synagogue and they're choosing what Jesus is going to read, what scroll Jesus is going to read. And Jesus is kidding John about, you know, oh, maybe we should do, you know, this story or this story or this story, but they were all stories that happened after the Pentateuch. And John doesn't quite get it. And then there's this recognition like, oh, they don't have those stories. You know? So you'll watch that when it comes up, you'll recognize it. But anyway, so you've got, I would consider the Sadducees the conservative expression and the Pharisees the more liberal, the more moderate to liberal expression And the Pharisees that we know and love were Nicodemus and Joseph of Arimathea. And obviously, Paul himself was a Pharisee. So you've got this headbutt in the Sanhedrin, and some of them really want to trip him up by saying, he's not going with the law. He's not doing what our traditions say. And that would be the Sadducees, who were really having trouble with him doing something new. And the Pharisees were a little more willing to, kind of, let's look at this. Let's see, like Nicodemus, we know you're from God, because nobody could do what you do unless you were from God. So, so you've got these two juggernauts running into each other around the person of Paul. So it's Rome who actually extricates him from this argument and puts him in the barracks to keep him safe. And there, again, he has a vision of Jesus. So, when we talk about Paul, really only had this encounter with Jesus on the road to Damascus. But here in this part of Acts, he had an encounter with him in the temple in Jerusalem. And then later on, Jesus gives him this call to the Gentiles. And now he says that night the Lord stood near him and said, keep up your courage, because you've done a good job here in Jerusalem standing up for me. And now you're going to go and do it in Rome. So this is one of the reasons why Paul was so determined to get to Rome, because he knew he was being called to witness and to testify in Rome, because Jesus told him. So there are these encounters with Jesus where he seems to have some ongoing contact with Jesus beyond just getting knocked off his horse, and the scales falling from his eye. Okay. Questions, comments? Honestly, I don't think this section of Acts is in the lectionary. I don't remember ever really getting into reading, this part of the witness. So you may never have even heard this part of the story before. Okay, let me continue at verse 12. In the morning, the Jews joined in a conspiracy and bound themselves by an oath neither to eat nor drink until they had killed Paul. What a lovely, godlike thing to do. Let's make a covenant to kill Paul. There were more than 40 who joined in this conspiracy. They went, and what is 40? Number of completion. Oh, you're all being good by
Number
having
of
your
completion.
number of completion. Okay, so we got a whole number of them for this conspiracy. They went to the chief priests and elders and they said, we have strictly bound ourselves by an oath to taste no food until we have killed Paul. Now then, you and the council must notify the tribune to bring him down to you on the pretext that you want to make a more thorough examination of his case. And we are ready to do away with him before he arrives. Now, the son of Paul's sister heard about this ambush. So he went and gained entrance to the barracks and told Paul. Paul called one of the centurions and said, take this young man to the tribune, for he has something to report to him. So he took him, brought him to the tribune and said, the prisoner Paul called me and asked me to bring this young man to you. He has something to tell you. The tribune took him by the hand, drew him aside privately and asked, what is it that you have to report to me? He answered, the Jews have agreed to ask you to bring Paul down to the council tomorrow, as though they were going to inquire more thoroughly into his case. But do not be persuaded by them, for more than 40 of their men are lying in ambush for him. They have bound themselves by an oath neither to eat nor drink until they kill him. They are ready now and are waiting for your consent. So the tribune dismissed the young man, ordering him, tell no one that you have informed me of this. Then he summoned 2 of the centurions and said, get ready to leave by 9 o'clock tonight for Caesarea with 200 soldiers, 70 horsemen, and 200 spearmen. Also provide mounts for Paul to ride and take him safely to Felix the governor. He wrote a letter to this effect. Claudius Lysias to his excellency, the governor Felix, greetings. This man was seized by the Jews and was about to be killed by them. But when I learned that he was a Roman citizen, I came with the guard and rescued him. Since I wanted to know the charge for which they accused him, I had him brought to their council. I found that he was accused concerning questions of their law, but was charged with nothing deserving death or imprisonment. When I was informed that there would be a plot against the man, I sent him to you at once, ordering his accusers also to state before you what they have against him. So the soldiers, according to their instructions, took Paul and brought him during the night to Antipatris. The next day, they let the horsemen go on with him while they returned to the barracks. When they came to Caesarea and delivered the letter to the governor, they presented Paul also before him. On reading the letter, he asked what province he belonged to, and when he learned that he was from Cilicia, he said, I will give you a hearing when your accusers arrive. Then he ordered that he be kept under guard in Herod's headquarters. Okay. Let me go ahead and let's finish out this trial part. 5 days later, the high priest Ananias came down with some elders and an attorney, a certain Tertullus, and they reported their case against Paul to the governor. When Paul had been summoned, Tertullus began to accuse him, saying, Your Excellency, because of you, we have enjoyed peace, and reforms have been made for this people because of your foresight. We welcome this in every way and everywhere with utmost gratitude. But to detain you no further, I beg you to hear us briefly with your customary graciousness. We have, in fact, found this man a pestilent fellow, an agitator among all the Jews throughout the world, and a ringleader of the sect of the Nazarene. He even tried to profane the temple, and so we seized him. By examining him yourself, you will be able to learn from him concerning everything of which we accuse him. The Jews also joined in the charge by asserting that all this was true. When the governor motioned to him to speak, Paul replied, I cheerfully make my defense, knowing that for many years you have been a judge over this nation. As you can find out, it is not more than 12 days since I went up to worship in Jerusalem. They did not find me disputing with anyone in the temple or stirring up a crowd either in the synagogues or throughout the city. Neither can they prove to you the charge that they now bring against me. But this I admit to you, that according to the way which they call a sect, I worship the God of our ancestors, believing everything laid down according to the law written in the prophets. I have a hope in God, a hope that they themselves also accept, that there will be a resurrection of both the righteous and the unrighteous. Therefore, I do my best always to have a clear conscience toward God and all people. Now, after some years, I came to bring alms to my nation and to offer sacrifices. While I was doing this, they found me in the temple, completing the rite of purification without any crowd or disturbance. But there were some Jews from Asia. They ought to be here before you make an accusation, for if they have anything against me. Or let these men here tell what crime they had found when I stood before the council. Unless it was this one sentence that I called out while standing before them, it is about the resurrection of the dead that I am on trial before you today. But Felix, who was rather well informed about the way, adjourned the hearing with the comment, when Lysias the tribune comes down, I will decide your case. Then he ordered the centurion to keep him in custody, but to let him have some liberty and not to prevent any of his friends from taking care of his needs. Some days later, when Felix came with his wife Drusilla, who was Jewish, he sent for Paul and heard him speak concerning faith in Christ Jesus. And as he discussed judgment, justice, self-control, and the coming judgment, Felix became frightened and said, Go away for the present. When I have an opportunity, I will send for you. At the same time, he hoped that money would be given him by Paul, and for that reason, he used to send for him very often and converse with him. After 2 years had passed, Felix was succeeded by Porcius Festus, and since he wanted to grant the Jews a favor, Felix left Paul in prison. Okay. The legal system at its finest. So, what do you see? What do you think? What do you notice? What was the charge? Just about as clear as the charge against Jesus, huh? Yeah. Not this man said he was the Son of God, but you say, I am the Son of God. Yeah, I mean, he said it elsewhere, but not at that point. So we have here Paul, making his testimony, basically, having the opportunity to refute. Now think about, he's a Pharisee as well, so he has this opportunity to refute what the Sadducees are saying, and then we find out that Felix has a Jewish wife, which I think is really interesting. That we don't learn that until this point in the trial. And so he asks to hear him speak. I'm assuming Drusilla is with him about Jesus, so that Felix and Drusilla can hear more of what's going on, because he has kept himself knowledgeable about this sect that they call the Way. Maybe because Drusilla was interested in it, or maybe she was against it. I mean, I don't know what her position was, but the fact that Felix was up to date on the fact that there was this sect that they called themselves the Way, or that people called them the Way. And so he was a little more savvy than I think they probably thought. And this kind of interesting liaison, that this interesting alliance is I guess the word I'm looking for, between Rome and Paul, simply because of the designation that he was a Roman citizen. And that's what got him out of trouble. And that's what got the tribune on his side. And he got protection, and, all of these things happened. And then Felix, it says he was looking for some money, but also I think, if his wife is Jewish, she may have continued to want to hear from Paul. Very similar to the way Herodias kept asking about John the Baptist, and Herod was so intrigued by John the Baptist and what he had to say. But anyway, so they come all the way to Caesarea to make their case against Paul, and they really don't have anything, that they make any kind of case at all. So Felix basically just waits it out until he no longer is the governor. And when he gets, somebody comes to take his place, then he doesn't have to deal with it. So he passes that along to the next administration. That never happens ever around here. So he's going to go to the emperor, he's going to go to the king, and Paul is going to make his final defense before he goes to Rome. He will make it to Rome, and there he will succumb. So we've only got a couple more chapters. I am planning to be out of town next week for continuing ed, and probably will not be available to do Wednesdays at 1. So if I'm going to do it, I'll send you all a note, but just assume that we're going to skip a week. Okay. And then we'll finish up Acts when we get back the next week, which is the 27th. So in the end of October, we'll be at the end of Acts, and then we'll start November with something fresh. So you get your homework is to come up with the next thing you'd like. You get to vote. You get to bring your nomination for the next book that we're going to study. We can go back where we were into Kings and Samuel and Chronicles and all that David cycle. We can drop in, anywhere you want to drop in. I'm kind of up for anything. Okay.
I was just going to comment. When I listen to you read all of this, it just sounds like a fantastic novel.
Doesn't it?
wow, I could just really, you can just get into it. And it's the intrigue and it's the everything that goes with it. It's just,
Yeah.
you don't realize how
And do you
much.
think anybody would describe the Bible as a really good, interesting novel?
No, no, that's the thing, and you
Yeah.
sit here, and I've read this before, but this just really hit me when you were doing your narrative there.
So Miss Sally, have you been watching The Chosen?
Yes, I have some of it. Yeah.
Okay, because you talk about an interesting storytelling.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Oh, yeah. I love it. I love
Yeah,
it. I enjoy every bit of it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay, my dears. Well, that's a good place for us to stop, and we'll finish out the book.
I just want to put my vote in for meeting in person. I
Okay.
would love that.
Okay.
Me
I don't wanna
too.
put you- Yeah, I don't want to
Definitely
put you
me.
on the spot, but Lloyd and Melba, would you feel comfortable with this, just this group, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, probably 7 or 8 of us at the most, or in the narthex? Would you feel comfortable coming over for that? Or would you rather not? Lloyd's like, you think about it, let me know. Okay,
Susan?
Yeah.
Not to change the subject, just a couple of our kids have got COVID.
oh, man,
Doug and his wife. Doug's had a shot, she hasn't. She works for the school.
yeah, oh, man, okay. Well, we'll get them in the prayers. Okay, so I'm gonna sign off to the people on Facebook and YouTube, anybody who's watching over there. And I'll be in touch with you directly if something changes from what I just said. But we'll talk again next time about in person and where we're gonna go next,
I'll
okay?
be out of town anyway, but that was.
Next time or 2 times?
Yeah, next time.
Okay.
The next.
so-
So if you're gone, that's fine.
That's okay. Well, we're not doing Wednesdays and 1 because Pam's gonna be out of town.
There you go.
So I
We
will
can't
see-
do it without a research assistant.
Yeah, really. How would I move on? So I'll see you for sure on the 27th. Okay. Thanks
Okay.
you all of you for being with me today, and I'll see some of you tomorrow night for the Chosen Talk Back. And meantime, blessings on you. See ya.